So my wife Mary was talking to us and talking to the kids, and she said something about taking a doggy bag home from the restaurant. And my kids said, "What's that?" She said, You don't know what a doggy bag is?" "No, what's a doggy bag?" "Well, that's food to go. That's the food you take, the leftovers you take home." "Well, why is it called the doggy bag?" They said, "Well, people, you get some ribs or bones and you take them home and feed them to your dog." And they said, that's a funny name for leftovers. So neither of my kids knew what it meant. So public service announcement: if you go to a restaurant and you ask a young waiter or waitress for a doggy bag, they might not know what to do. There are other old terms that we talked about. Younger people, teenagers, they didn't know what a rain check is. As my mom was over the other night talking about a rain check. And you take a rain check when the store's out of something you want to buy, and they'll give you the sale price, give you an IOU, get the sale price if you come back when they get more. Or we started talking about other old terms. Layaway. When was the last time you put something on layaway? 1982? Again, my kids thought that was an absurd way to buy things. And Mary was explaining to them, you don't understand, there was no Amazon. If you saw something you wanted, but you didn't have the money for it yet, you might never see it again. You might not be able to get anywhere. If you saw something at Kmart you wanted, maybe they'd have something in the next town over if you're willing to drive. But if you didn't lock that in, it might just be gone forever. One more older term, magi. Magi in the Bible. It's the wise men. Today we're talking about the wise men. The original word was magi. A lot of the English translations of the Bible use the term wise men. But it means a lot more than that. You might be able to find wise men almost anywhere you go or in any country. I mean, there's the old joke where you could insult any country by saying, why wasn't Jesus born in your country? Like, I don't know why. Well, because they couldn't find a virgin or a wise man. They're more than wise men. The Magi were a sort of religious priest from Persia and from the Middle East. It's where we get the term magician. They were ancient astrologers. There were a lot of different religions and parts of the world that believed in looking at the stars in order to discern what's going on in the world. We have modern day astrology that is a descendant from that. But while we're talking about old terms, we can't be too hard on the young people. One of my friends from seminary had asked AI, artificial intelligence, to come up for a blessing with teenage slang. May your holidays be truly bussing with cheer and your gatherings absolutely mad lit. May your presence exhibit peak sigma energy and your festive spirit possess irresistible riz, capturing every eye and heart. Let no moment be sus or skibbity, but filled with no cap, joy and harmony, keeping the good vibes 6-7. Yeah, you're all wondering what that means. Ask your grandkids. Back to the Magi. It's derived from Old Persian magus, which tradition probably goes back 4,000 years, back to the country of Iran, modern-day Iran, which was then Persia. There's a religion then called Zoroastrianism. Maybe you haven't heard of that. Zoroaster was a prophet that they follow. One of the oldest religion that practices monotheism or belief in one God. But they had gained a pretty good following for their practice of astrology and being able to discern what's happening in the world by, or so they believed, by looking at the stars. And back then, it was regarded as real science, a real thing. Now, I remember being confused as a kid between astrology and astronomy. Astrology is predicting the future and what's going on in the world by what the stars are doing. Now, it's long been considered in our world since the time of Enlightenment to be pseudoscience. Yet, science, like you might study at a university, would be astronomy, the study of planets and stars and their movements. But the Magi practiced astronomy of discerning what's going on in the world with what's going on in the stars. Interesting, though, I've always wondered why God used them and put them in the Christmas story, where Persia appears in the Bible, Babylon and Persia, during the time of the Babylonian captivity, 586 BC. Babylon defeated Israel and hauled all the able-bodied people off as captives. And for the Jewish people, their practicing their religion was forbidden and considered idolatry. So I've always wondered about this puzzle. So we'll unpack some of that today. We'll look in Matthew chapter 2 this morning. This is one of the two main Christmas texts. We have this. Matthew has the account of the wise men and Herod. Luke's gospel has the shepherds in the field that come to pay homage to Jesus. So Matthew chapter 2, verse 1. Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and have come to worship him. So this delegation of Magi came into Jerusalem, which was the capital city, and we're asking about who has been born King of the Jews. They come to Herod. Why Herod? Well, Jerusalem was the capital of Israel, and Herod was the king. You remember in reading your New Testament that the Romans ruled the region, but you had a Roman emperor, you still had regional kings. Herod in the Bible is confusing, as there's several Herods in the New Testament. It's known as the Herodian dynasty. But this was the first Herod, known as Herod the Great. His son and then grandsons ruled and appear in the New Testament. So, of course, if they're going to find the freshly born King of the Jews, they go to the capital, they find the king, and ask where the new king's been born. Well, Herod, he doesn't know anything about a new king being born. I mean, it's logical. It was probably what we might consider to be an honest mistake, going to Herod to look for the king. They might have assumed that it would probably be Herod's son or grandson. So there's the King of the Jews that's been born. Where do we find him? Herod. Herod's an interesting character. As king, he did a lot of building campaigns during his reign. Really did a lot to build up the city of Jerusalem. Yet the Jewish people didn't really accept him, as he was only part Jewish. Was not considered to be a godly man, so the religious Jews worked with him, but didn't seem to respect him as their leaders. And he was so paranoid about keeping his power, he had a couple of his sons executed because he was paranoid that they were going to try to take the throne from him. Seems a bit backwards, but these details speak to his character. I mean, if we were going to go around and make a show of hands, like if somebody said to you, one of you is going to die, is it going to be you or your child? I think most parents would pick themselves to be sacrificed so that their kids could live. Well, not Herod. When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all of Jerusalem with him. And when he had gathered all the chief priests and scribes and the people together, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. So, where is the Christ going to be born? Now, we're reminded that Jesus Christ wasn't his last name, but a title, meaning Messiah. The promised Messiah, the one that had been prophesied about for hundreds of years. Where are we supposed to find him? Where is he supposed to be born? Well, it tells us in the beginning now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, right where the prophet said that he was going to be born. So Matthew has this in his gospel. He writes to a Jewish audience, showing that Jesus is the fulfillment of all the Old Testament prophecies. So this is an evangelistic book for the Jewish people. So they said to him, in Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it is written by the prophet, but you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are not least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. So Herod gathers the chief priests and scribes. Obviously, it's showing that his biblical knowledge is lacking. So he gets the scribes and chief priests to break it down for them. So the answer is Bethlehem. Then Herod, when he had secretly called the wise men, determined from them what time the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem and said, go and search carefully for the young child. And when you have found him, bring back word to me that I may come and worship him also. And he's saying, well, the Messiah is going to be born. Well, once you find him, come get me because I want to worship him too. When they heard the king, they departed. And behold, the star which they had seen in the east went before them, till it came and stood over where the young child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceedingly great joy. And when they had come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented gifts to him, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. So we see that Herod did not want to go find the child so that he could worship him, but he wanted to find baby Jesus so that he could kill him. So they had the star which they had been following. It said the star which they had seen in the east went before them. But before that, Herod was asking them what time the star appeared. Perhaps it was not there during that time. But then when they sent off to find the child or the Messiah, the star reappears and guides them. I heard one this week that a preacher had said, well, why didn't Herod just follow the star? Well, he believed that there is a theory that Herod couldn't see the star because God wasn't bringing him there. But the wise men could see the star and could discern what was going on. Now, I've preached a lot of Christmas sermons, often a few a year, and I've dealt with this text before, and I have always wondered why and how God would use pagan astrologers to find Jesus. Well, the wise men's journey, I believe, began hundreds of years prior. That dawned on me this year with the book of Daniel. Daniel served King Nebuchadnezzar during the Babylonian captivity when they were hauled off, the able-bodied young men, as captives to Babylon. Daniel, he was quite an important character. He was one that was put in royal service to be a sort of ambassador to the Jewish people for the king of Babylon as Babylon ruled over. And then kingdoms fell and kingdoms changed several times through there. You have the Medes and the Persians soon ruling. And so we have in Daniel chapter 2, in the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar dreamed dreams, wherewith his spirit was troubled, and his sleep brake from him. Then the king commanded to call the magicians, and the astrologers, and the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans, for to show the king his dreams. They came and stood before the king. And the king's saying, I had this troubling dream. It kept me awake. I'm not able to sleep. I need one of you to interpret it. He tells them the dream, and they're all stumped. Daniel's brought in, and he said, the Lord gave me the answer to your dream, and breaks down from him this dream that he had of this great statue that's been built. So Daniel explains it to him and about his kingdom and the future kingdoms to come. And so the king's so pleased with him, we go down to Daniel 2, verse 47. It says, the king answered unto Daniel and said, of a truth it is that your God is God of gods, Lord of kings and revealers of secrets, seeing that thou couldest reveal this secret. Then the king made Daniel a great man and gave him many great gifts, and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon, and a chief of the governors over all the wise men. You get that last part? Daniel, this pious, God-fearing Jewish man, was put in charge of all the wise men. He's now the chief wise man. Now they had a few different types. It said that they named them magicians, astrologers, sorcerers, and Chaldean. But during this time frame, this would have been the Zoroastrian astrologers, the Magi. So, a few hundred years prior, Daniel's in charge of the Magi. What do you think he taught them? Isaiah's prophecies. I mean, we don't know this for sure, but his character, you read the book of Daniel, he's a God-fearing man that was ready to give his life and be executed, thrown in the lion's den because he wouldn't bow down to the king and worship him. One who prayed to Yahweh every day and was persecuted for it. Well, he's put in charge of all the Zoroastrian Magi. So logically, he had the respect of the king and of the people, being that the Jewish God is King of Kings, Lord of Lords. Even though they believed in other gods, they revered him as a great God, the Hebrew God, the Jewish God. So Daniel would have no doubt taught them about them. So they would have known, presumably they would have known Isaiah's prophecy. They would have been waiting for this Messiah to come who was going to bless and bring salvation unto all the world. And somehow, God used a star to lead them to baby Jesus. Now, I'm not sure they totally knew or understood what they were looking for. They were looking for this great king, Messiah, King of the Jews, and they knew to come before him and to worship him. Probably they didn't fully understand Jesus and what he was about and his mission to save the world from sin. It's interesting, though, that God would have used another religion that had then, in Daniel's time, been considered idolatry in order to have enough truth in it to bring these men to the feet of Jesus, to bow down before him. You hear stories like that. My best friend when I was a kid, Abe, his family was Christian, but his parents had been hippies and were real active in the hippie movement. They'd traveled to India to have religious experiences. They lived in hippie communes before he was born, and his mom loved to tell the story that while she was in the hippie movement, she was meditating one day, really into Eastern mysticism and New Age belief, and Jesus appeared to her, telling her that I'm the way, the truth, and the life, and to start worshiping him and to start following him. And so she was led to a good Bible-believing church then, and became a Christian and was just on fire lady for the Lord. So God does use this. I keep reading and hearing stories lately that in the Middle East, Jesus has appeared to a lot of Muslim people during prayers, telling them to follow after him. And there's been a lot of revival going on in that part of the world that is very interesting to watch. So, strange is the story of the wise men from the East when you realize who they are coming to Jesus. They didn't totally know what they were looking for, but they found it in Christ. This happens to people all the time. I mean, the journey of the wise men began hundreds of years prior. You have these prophecies of the Messiah's going to come. You have God working out in Babylon and Persia, preparing them for the Messiah. In Daniel's time, in Isaiah's time, God's at work. God had this plan from the beginning that all of this was going to play out. And then we have the wise men. They didn't know what they were searching for. I mean, this had to be quite a quest. Say, going from Persia, modern-day Iran, presumably on over to Israel, no cars, no planes, would have probably taken a long time. They didn't know what they were looking for, but they found it in Jesus. There are a lot of people. Maybe you're looking for something in your life. Maybe you don't totally know what it is that's going to fill that need or that hole to give you a sense of purpose, as everybody's looking for purpose and meaning. But like the wise man, you'll find that it's found in Jesus. They found him, and then they present to him their gifts: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. By the tradition of 3 gifts, we usually have in nativity scenes 3 wise men. Now, nobody knows for sure how many there are. The Syrian Orthodox Church believes there's 12 of them. Traditionally, though, they're given names. Melchior is often referred to as the oldest member of the Magi. He was traditionally called the king of Persia and brought the gift of gold to Jesus. So that's how he's depicted. Balthazar is traditionally referred to as kings of Arabia and given the gift of myrrh. Myrrh is a sort of scent or incense or perfume, cologne given. And Casper, Tradition doesn't say as much about Casper, other than he seems to be their sidekick. He presented the frankincense. So historically too, according to the book, The Travels of Marco Polo, you probably learned about that in history class, gold symbolizes the power over the material world as a king on earth. Frankincense symbolizes the power over the spiritual world as a deity, and myrrh symbolizes the healing power over death. Some say or speculate that the myrrh was kept to anoint Jesus' body when he was buried. And they came a long way to see this baby. How far would you travel for a baby shower? Well, it depends. Is it your grandkid? You might go a long way, but when you go to a baby shower, what gifts do you like to give? Well, gold is good for any occasion. I've wondered about the other two. What does a baby do with frankincense and myrrh? Or the family? It would make sense if they were saved for anointing Jesus' body. I've heard too that if it were 3 wise women, they would have brought a casserole, diaper, and some clothes. You have men, though, who can be clueless about these sorts of things. Well, let's get back to the Bible story. So they present him gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Verse 12. Then being divinely warned in a dream that they should not return to Herod, they departed for their country by another way. So the Lord warned all of them in a dream, don't go back through Jerusalem. Don't go back and see King Herod. Verse 13. Now when they had departed, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, Arise, take the young child and his mother, flee to Egypt, and stay there until I bring you word. For Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. So we have Herod. Herod the Great. Herod's the most powerful man in the country, temporally speaking. And he decides he's going to hear where this baby is, and he's going to go there and kill him. Well, we're seeing a lot here and learning a lot about God's plan. The most powerful man in the country that ruled over it had Roman troops at his disposal, was powerless to stop it. He was powerless to stop God's plan. Now, he didn't fully understand what was going on, but he thought that he could kill the Jewish Messiah, and then he and his descendants could stay kings. I mean, what does this teach us about God's plan? God's plan had been unfolding for a long time. The wise men's journey, I believe, began with Daniel hundreds of years prior, with Isaiah's prophecy. God had a plan for these wise men then to come and find them. God had a plan for his Messiah, for Jesus Christ to be born, to teach us more about God and bring us closer to him, and to die for the sins of the world and to be resurrected so that we may have eternal life. This had been God's plan from the beginning. The most powerful man of the day in the region thought he could stop God's plan. No, God's plan, nothing can stop God's plan. God's plan had been planted and unfolding for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Nobody was able to stop God's plan. The wise men found Jesus. We have the wise men in Matthew, the shepherds in Luke. The wise men bringing gold. I mean, we can assume they were rich. Tradition has it as being kings of Persia, king of Persia, and king of Arabia. We sing these three kings during Christmas time. These three kings of Orient are bearing gifts. They've traveled so far. As we sing that, yeah, they had means that they were bringing to Jesus. And Herod here is thinking that, well, he's going to be able to stop them. We see here as I'll finish the text. Herod, when he saw that he was deceived by the wise men, was exceedingly angry. And he sent forth and put to death all the male children who were in Bethlehem and all of his districts, from 2 years and under, according to the time which he determined from the wise men. Then was fulfilled that which was spoken by Jeremiah the prophet, saying, a voice was heard in Ramah, lamentation, weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children, refusing to be comforted because they are no more. Now, when Herod was dead, back to Herod giving this order to kill all the male children. When you read some history and read about the other atrocities that he committed, including having 2 of his sons executed because of paranoia, it's not too far-fetched that this really happened with this order to execute all the males 2 and under. Interesting, though. Daniel back to speak to Nebuchadnezzar through a dream. Spoke to the wise men through a dream to go home a different way. Don't go back by King Herod and through Jerusalem. Now, God gave Joseph, Jesus' earthly father, Mary's husband, a dream to take the child to safety, take Jesus and go to Egypt. Joseph's an interesting character as well because he doesn't say anything in the Bible. So we don't hear a whole lot about him. He's often referred to, it's a funny name, Joseph the Silent. Joseph the Silent, but hey, how do you think that went? Like, hey Mary, I had a dream that we're supposed to move to Egypt. And they uproot everything, pack up and go. Before the order was even given. Before the order to kill the kids 2 and under was even given, so that takes a lot of faith and obedience to do that. You don't believe me? Try that with your husband or wife. Hey, we're moving to Egypt, and we got to leave today. Let me know how that goes over. No, but Jesus chose Mary and Joseph, I believe, because of their obedience, because of how much they trusted and obeyed God. You ever think about how hard that would be to do? Like, okay, guess we're moving to Egypt. Whole different country, different language. We talked about last week from the offering given to the temple when Jesus was born. They gave his parents gave the offering that was set aside as a substitute offering if you were poor. But hey, guess what? God provided. Now they had some gold for the journey in order to make it happen and start a new life there for a time. Now, when Herod was dead, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt. So Joseph got a dream to leave and go to Egypt, and then he got another dream when it was time to go back. Yeah, some of us need to start paying attention to our dreams. It's hard, though, to discern dreams. Sometimes we all dream nonsense, and sometimes the Lord can use it to warn us of something or get our attention and tell us to do something. An angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt, saying, Arise, take the young child and his mother, and go back to the land of Israel, for those who sought the young child's life are dead. Then he arose, took the young child and his mother, and came into the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning over Judea instead of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. And being warned by God in a dream, he turned aside into the region of Galilee. And he came and dwelt in a city called Nazareth, that it might be fulfilled that which was spoken by the prophets. He shall be called the Nazarene. So there's a lot in this text of the wise men. And I hope you'll think about it whenever you see a nativity scene or hear this text read about the wise men. That the wise men's journey, it's very strange that the Lord used astrologers to find Jesus and to go and worship him. Magi, magicians. But I believe their journey began hundreds of years prior, through Daniel and through the star, to get their attention. God uses interesting things to get our attention. And God had a plan for the wise men, even though they didn't fully understand what their search was about. They found it in Christ. I believe there's a lot of people out there looking for something in their life, looking for meaning, looking for purpose, looking for God's love and acceptance, trying to fill it with all kinds of things. The book of Ecclesiastes does a good job of what do we find meaning in. Young King Solomon first thought that the purpose of life that he was looking for was found in pleasure. That's where we get the term eat, drink, and be merry. He partied. He had a good time. He sought to live the good life. And yet, after a while, he found it empty. People try to fix that hole in their life by partying sometimes. Solomon's interesting because it's developmental. How many young people are looking for a good time? Maybe turning to drugs and alcohol and casual relationships, and yet still feel empty. Then King Solomon says, then I thought the purpose of life was working hard and doing something great. And he undertook a great building campaign. And he thought nothing's better in life than achievement, building something great, and enjoying the fruits of your work, the fruits of your labor. So he did it. Took many years. A lot of people chase that too, looking for achievement, career, status, the house, the car, whatever else you're after. Yet he found that empty. And then in his later years, he said, I found what I'm looking for. And the answer to it's fear God and keep his commandments. He found it in God. The wise men, I believe, the traditional liturgical churches consider the three wise men to be saints. They didn't really know what they're searching for, but they found it in Jesus. If you don't know what you're looking for today, you're looking for something, everybody's looking for something. I encourage you to give Jesus a try, to find meaning, purpose, love, and acceptance in a new life in Jesus. And God's plan. The most powerful man in the country, Herod the Great, was powerless to stop God's plan. God still has a plan. His plan's still unfolding. Nothing gets in its way. I believe God has a plan for your life and my life as well. As far as the future's in his hands. This Christmas, whatever's going on in our lives, take comfort in knowing that God has a plan. God has it planned out. Even though the wise men didn't fully understand, and we don't always understand how things are unfolding. just encourage you to take a step of faith and put your trust in God with whatever's going on in your life.